The sharp crack of a gunshot ripped through the crisp afternoon air. I dropped my toolbox and ran. The scream came next, ragged, human, agonizing. Not far. 2 houses down. I vaulted over our white picket fence, breath caught in my throat, the whole world narrowing into a tunnel of panic. Then I saw him. Jaden. My son. 15 years old. Face pale. Blood blooming across his hoodie like ink in water. He was crumpled on the sidewalk, one arm thrown protectively over the shoulders of a blind man in a tattered army jacket, Mr. Riley, our neighbor and a decorated veteran. Jaden had shielded him. His own body a human barrier. Neighbors were gathering. Screams. Gasps. Phones out. Confusion. Fear. She shot him, someone yelled. Because he looked suspicious. It was Karen, HOA Karen. I dropped to my knees, hands shaking as I pressed into Jaden's side. Stay with me, buddy. Stay with me. You hear me? His lips trembled. I didn't do anything, Dad. I was just helping him cross. I know, I whispered, tears already slipping. You did nothing wrong. Paramedics pushed through. Blood on their gloves. Shouting vitals. GSW to the abdomen. Get him stabilized. Go, go, go. The stretcher vanished into the back of the ambulance. The doors slammed. I wasn't allowed in. The sirens faded, but the anger didn't. Then she appeared. Karen. Late 50s. Cropped silver blonde hair. HOA badge pinned like a weapon. Still holding the damn pistol, now zip-tied by police. Her lips were pursed like she was the one wronged. I thought he was stealing something, she muttered, voice thin, almost annoyed. He was standing too close to that man. Looking around. It didn't feel right. He was guiding a blind veteran. I exploded. You shot my son because you didn't like how he looked? I didn't know he was your son, she snapped, like that somehow made it better. He didn't belong on that side of the block. Not during HOA activity hours. HOA activity hours? The cop stood between us. My fists clenched. My teeth hurt from the pressure of not swinging. Not screaming more. Across the street, a group of kids watched, wide-eyed and silent. One of them was filming. I turned toward the camera. Get this on tape. She just shot a teenage boy. My boy. Because he was helping someone. Karen folded her arms, smug now. That footage won't hold in court. He matched the description. Suspicious behavior. Loitering. I'm protected. The cop next to her looked uncertain. But I saw the doubt creeping in. The moral weight of what just happened was beginning to settle over everyone. Sirens faded in the distance. The blood remained on the concrete. I stood there, fists trembling, staring at that crimson stain where my son nearly died, where he might still die. The neighborhood, our quiet, sleepy cul-de-sac, was forever changed. And I wasn't just a father anymore. I was fire. I was coming. And I wasn't going to stop until the world knew exactly what kind of monster was hiding behind that HOA badge. Malik Jordan was the kind of kid that reminded people what hope looked like. 17, sharp as a tack, polite to a fault, and raised on discipline with a dose of defiance. He had one of those smiles that made even the grumpiest neighbors nod back without realizing it. Honor student, captain of the school debate team, part-time cashier at the corner grocery, but the thing that really set him apart? Every Saturday morning, without fail, he'd knock gently on the rusted front door of house number 19, the quiet house with the chipped eagle mailbox, and ask, "You ready for the park, Mr. Daniels?" Mr. Luther Daniels wasn't just any neighbor. He was a Vietnam veteran, a former Marine sniper turned history teacher turned widower. Time and diabetes had stolen his sight, but not his dignity. He walked with a wooden cane, moved slow but stood tall. He lived alone, rarely asked for help, and spent his days listening to war documentaries and classical jazz on an old dusty radio. Malik had met him 2 years ago, delivering groceries his mom had forgotten to pick up. It started with, "I'll walk you to the porch." Then, it became, "Let's sit on the bench a while." And before anyone noticed, Saturday mornings became their ritual. Malik would guide Luther to the park, 3 blocks, 1 steep sidewalk, 2 uneven curbs, and a million cautious steps. They'd sit on the bench under the elm tree near the fountain. Malik would describe the colors of the sky, the dogs playing fetch, the kids laughing, even the smell of the food trucks. Luther always listened in silence before saying the same thing, "Feels like I can still see it, just different." On those walks, people took notice, mostly in admiration. But not Cynthia Baxter. She wasn't Cynthia to anyone in the neighborhood. She was Mrs. Baxter, the self-appointed queen of the HOA, clipboard glued to her palm, lips always tight like she was holding back something sour. She wore beige like it was armor and walked like every crack in the pavement was a personal insult. Cynthia didn't wave. Cynthia reported. She had a problem with Malik from the moment he moved in. It started small, a note about grass height exceeding community standards. Then came a warning for bike parked on front lawn. Once, she even left a formal notice for music volume inconsistent with HOA guidelines when Malik played Miles Davis for Luther one Saturday. His mother, Camille, tried to keep the peace. "Just ignore her, baby," she'd say. But Malik couldn't ignore the stares. Cynthia watched him like a hawk with a grudge, always just a little too long, always just a little too close when he walked by. It wasn't about the rules. It was about control. And Malik? He wasn't someone she could control. The week before the shooting, Malik got a letter in the mail. Not from school, not from a friend. From the HOA. It read, "Resident Malik Jordan is reminded that loitering with non-residents near the parkway is not permitted without proper supervision or purpose." "Loitering," he muttered aloud, holding the letter in disbelief. Camille snatched it from his hand, jaw tightening. "They mean Mr. Daniels." Malik's eyes darkened, but his voice stayed calm. "I'm not stopping." And he didn't. That Saturday, like every other, he showed up at Luther's door. Helped him down the steps. Walked slowly through their usual path, telling stories the whole way, about his plans for college, about a girl he liked in chemistry class, about how he wanted to study biomedical engineering and build prosthetics for veterans like Mr. Daniels. "I want to give people their legs back," he said. Luther just smiled. "You already give more than most who still got theirs." But that morning was different. Cynthia watched them from her upstairs window, fingers tight around her curtain like she could pull the world into silence if she yanked hard enough. She saw Malik reach out and gently guide Luther past the flower bed she'd planted herself. Her rose bush, her prized miniature lavender rose bush, brushed slightly against Luther's cane. It didn't snap. It didn't bend. It simply swayed. But that was enough. She stormed downstairs, heels clacking like gunshots against her hardwood floor. Reached into her hallway drawer and pulled out the pistol her late husband had left behind, the one she never admitted she kept loaded. She didn't call the police. She didn't shout a warning. She didn't even hesitate. Because in her mind, this wasn't Malik helping a blind veteran. It was a suspicious young man harassing an elderly resident. Back in the park, Malik helped Luther sit, pulled out a water bottle, and started talking about his last school project. A breeze danced through the trees. Kids screamed in delight in the background. And Cynthia Baxter crossed her lawn, gun at her side, fury in her eyes. But that's when everything broke. And the sound that followed wasn't just a gunshot. It was a shattering of trust. A betrayal of community. The start of a storm. And the end of something sacred. The day after the community cleanup, Malik took Daniels, the blind veteran, on their usual afternoon walk. The old man shuffled slowly, cane tapping against the concrete while Malik gently guided him along the path lined with white hydrangeas and trimmed hedges. Daniels often joked that with Malik by his side, he could see more than most folks with eyes. But that peace didn't last. From behind her window, Karen Rydell, the self-proclaimed enforcer of HOA rules, stared them down like they were trespassers. As they passed her house, she stormed out onto her porch. "Why is he here again?" she barked. "This isn't a care facility. We didn't approve any kind of home help program." Daniels froze. "Did she just say that about me?" he whispered. Malik, trying to keep things calm, replied, "Ma'am, we're just walking. Mr. Daniels is my neighbor." Karen crossed her arms. "You're always lurking. Filming people's homes, walking too slow like you're watching something. We're not running a charity here, boy." That word again, boy. Daniels clenched his cane like a weapon. Malik swallowed the insult and moved along. That evening, at the HOA's monthly meeting, Malik's mother Tanya Ross stood up during public comment. Her voice trembled with a mixture of fury and fear. "My son walks our disabled neighbor daily. He volunteers, he's got a scholarship coming his way, and you let your board member slander him like he's a criminal." Karen scoffed in the back. "No one's above the HOA guidelines." Before Tanya could respond, George Tran, another board member, stood up. "I don't like what I'm seeing either," he said, looking directly at Karen. "We're creating an environment where kindness is being treated like a threat. That's dangerous." Karen snapped, "Are you implying I'm a threat?" George didn't flinch. "I'm saying if we keep looking at Malik like he doesn't belong here, something terrible is going to happen." But the board brushed off Tanya's request for a formal investigation. "We don't handle personal disputes," they said, "unless it's a violation of community standards." Tanya left the meeting shaking. "They're not going to help us," she told her husband Ray Ross that night. "They've already made up their minds." Ray didn't say much. He just stood up and walked to the garage. The next morning, he began installing 4 new security cameras around the house: front door, backyard, driveway, and mailbox. "I'll be damned if they twist another story," he muttered as he ran the wiring. Meanwhile, Malik kept pushing forward. He was named Student of the Month for his community service and mentoring at the local youth center. The school posted a photo of him holding the certificate, smiling awkwardly in front of the flagpole. Daniels called that evening. "I saw the picture on my daughter's Facebook. You're making me proud, kid." "Thanks, Mr. Daniels," Malik said. "Means a lot coming from you." But there was a quiet unease in his voice. "You all right?" Daniels asked. "Just feels like people are watching me now, like waiting for me to slip." Daniels sighed. "That's because people like Karen don't see kindness, they see difference. Keep walking anyway." Malik did. But the looks lingered longer. Karen would now step onto her lawn when Malik walked past, her phone in hand, pretending to take evidence. Another neighbor, Mrs. Ellison, quietly apologized one morning. "She says you stare at houses too long," she whispered. "But I know that's not true. Just be careful, okay?" Every step outside started to feel like a test. The sidewalk didn't feel like home anymore, it felt like a spotlight. And yet, Malik never missed a walk with Daniels. Rain or shine, they strolled the same route, pausing only so Daniels could feel the breeze, or hear the children laughing in the park nearby. Until that one day, when the laughter stopped, and the breeze turned sharp. The seed had been planted. We just didn't know how deep it would grow. The sun beamed down on the red, white, and blue that fluttered from every porch and mailbox on Ridgewater Lane. It was the annual Veterans Day Parade, an event the whole neighborhood used to look forward to. For once, even the HOA kept their distance, too occupied with image management to stir up drama. Flags were lined up perfectly, kids had face paint, and a local high school brass band marched down the middle of the street. Families clapped from their driveways, holding cups of lemonade and smartphones. But none of that mattered in a few minutes. Malik adjusted the grip on Daniel's elbow, guiding him slowly along the edge of the parade route. The old man, blinded in the Gulf War, insisted on walking the parade himself every year. He didn't want to be seen as some old guy sitting in a folding chair. Malik, wearing his ROTC cadet uniform and polished shoes, had volunteered without hesitation. "You've got the vision, Mr. Daniels," he'd said, "I'm just your eyes today." Daniels had chuckled. "And your heart, son. Don't sell yourself short." They were about 20 feet from the HOA clubhouse. Malik slowed their pace to match the uneven sidewalk. That's when the chill hit. Karen. She was standing just beyond her porch rail, dressed in a sun hat and camo shirt, sipping iced tea like she was watching for insurgents. In one hand, she held binoculars, cheap ones with scratched lenses. In the other, dangling down and half hidden under her shawl, was something metallic. Malik didn't see her. But she saw him. From behind her binoculars, her eyes twitched. Her jaw clenched. "He's running," she muttered under her breath. "He's going for the old man. He's charging." She set her drink down and pulled the gun fully into view. It was a Glock. HOA guidelines said, "No firearms visible on public streets." Karen always thought that rule didn't apply to her. She had even bragged in board meetings that she had a concealed carry permit, just in case, she'd wink. This was her, just in case. The moment stretched like a wire about to snap. Down below, the band hit a crescendo. Drums thundered. Clarinets screamed. Karen raised the gun, aimed at Malik's back. She didn't say anything first. No warning. No cry for help. She pulled the trigger. The crack split through the music like lightning. One shot. Then another. Malik's knees buckled. His body twisted as Daniels screamed in horror, stumbling with him and falling hard onto the grass. Spectators screamed. Some hit the ground. Others pulled out their phones, stunned, recording what they couldn't process. Blood soaked through Malik's white shirt, staining the ROTC patches his mother had ironed on herself. Karen stood tall now, her gun held in both hands, chest heaving. "He was charging," she shrieked. "I was protecting the veteran." He looked suspicious. Police sirens howled in the distance, already en route due to noise complaints from earlier. But the chaos was full-blown. Daniels crawled to Malik, pressing his trembling hands over the wound. "Stay with me, son. You hear me? You stay with me." Karen stepped forward, as if expecting applause. He lunged. "I saw it all. He was gonna rob the old man. I saw it with my own eyes." But Daniels turned to her with fury and heartbreak in his blind gaze. "You monster," he spat. "You shot a child. That boy was helping me walk. Helping me." Karen froze. It wasn't going the way she pictured. Not at all. Across the street, Mrs. Chen had her security camera angled right at the sidewalk. The footage was already uploading to the cloud. It showed Malik walking calmly, respectfully, beside Daniels, no threats, no sudden moves. Just kindness. Paramedics rushed in. A stretcher. Bloodied gauze. Malik's mother arrived mid-scream, knees collapsing at the sight of her son. "No, no, no." Police drew their weapons on Karen. She dropped hers slowly, blinking like she just woke up from a dream. I didn't mean, he looked like he was going to do something. He didn't belong, you're under arrest, an officer snapped. Put your hands behind your back. Now. Cuffs. Camera flashes. Phones everywhere. And a silence thicker than anything this community had ever known. This wasn't just a parade anymore. This was going to be national. The beeping machines next to Malik's hospital bed were the only sounds piercing the silence of room 407 in Cedar Heights Medical. His shoulder was heavily bandaged, and an oxygen tube helped him breathe. The bullet had fractured his clavicle and grazed his lung. Doctors said he was lucky to be alive. But lucky felt like an insult. Malik had nearly died for helping a blind veteran cross a sidewalk. Across town, retired Master Sergeant Leonard Daniels sat at a press conference, voice unshaken but eyes glassy. "That boy saved me," he said, gripping the podium. "I don't care how Karen tries to spin it, he helped me like it was second nature. That woman pulled a gun on a kid, and she fired. No warning. No hesitation. Shot him in cold blood." The press room went silent. Then, like gasoline on a spark, Daniel's words erupted across social media and news outlets. Meanwhile, Karen was holed up in her beige-trimmed home at the edge of the cul-de-sac, feeding police a story that was already crumbling. "He lunged at me," she insisted during her initial interview. "It was dark, I was scared, I thought he was trying to rob that man." The officer raised an eyebrow. "You're saying a kid, who's known in the neighborhood, who plays varsity basketball, who was in broad daylight, lunged at a blind veteran? I didn't know who he was. I reacted. It was self-defense," she shrieked. But the story was falling apart faster than she could rebuild it. 2 blocks away, local grocery store security footage was quietly retrieved by investigators. The camera had captured the entire incident: Malik, calmly helping Daniels across the walkway, Karen storming up, yelling, the flash of her concealed weapon, and then the shot. Malik hadn't even raised a hand. The footage was meant to remain under wraps, but somehow, some say accidentally, others suspect intentionally, it leaked online within 24 hours. By the next morning, #JusticeForMalik was trending in 14 U.S. cities. People were angry. Not just the black community. Veterans groups, parents, civil rights advocates, they all saw the same thing: a teen doing something selfless, and a woman drunk on HOA power trying to justify shooting him by calling him suspicious. That word again. Suspicious. It echoed in every angry tweet, every emotional news segment, every protest sign. The HOA office became ground zero. Protesters gathered out front with posters showing Malik's smiling face in his basketball jersey. "He helped a hero. She shot him." Others had Daniel's military portrait with bold block letters, "Not on our watch." Board members started resigning one by one. First it was Phyllis Gaines, who claimed she hadn't known what Karen was capable of. Then Jonathan Nielsen quit, deleting his Facebook profile and leaving town. The HOA president, Harold Grant, tried to hang on, issuing a generic statement about community safety, but the pressure mounted fast. Malik's father, Jamal, sat beside his son's hospital bed, his hand never leaving Malik's. He wasn't a man who raised his voice. But when his lawyer arrived, he said 5 words with absolute clarity: "We're not letting this go." Daniels showed up an hour later, standing over Malik's bed with tears in his eyes. "Your son's a hero," he said to Jamal. He didn't hesitate. Not for a second. "He saw me struggling, and he stepped in when no one else did." Jamal's voice was thick. "And now he's fighting to breathe." Daniels nodded. "Let's make sure she answers for that." The 2 men shook hands. Their legal teams moved fast. Civil suit filings began preparation within days. Multiple charges were discussed: reckless endangerment, aggravated assault, civil rights violations under color of HOA authority. Karen's HOA-issued firearm policy, signed by the board, was now under scrutiny, and legal analysts were calling the HOA's liability massive. Meanwhile, Malik's mother, Lena, spoke quietly to a nurse who offered her sympathy. "You think they'll do right by him?" the nurse asked. Lena looked through the window at the crowd chanting outside. "They don't have a choice anymore." The police, now feeling the full weight of public pressure, reopened every prior complaint against Karen. Neighbors who had been too scared to come forward before were now talking, stories of racial profiling, harassment, intimidation. Everything was changing. Karen's gated security couldn't keep the truth out. And it was only a matter of time before the courtroom lights turned on. Raymond "Ray" King hadn't cried in years. He'd served 2 decades as a legal investigator for the state attorney's office, digging into fraud, racketeering, and corruption. He'd stared down gang enforcers and walked through scorched crime scenes without blinking. But watching his son lie broken and bloodied in a hospital bed, wires, tubes, pale skin, stitches down his side, that shattered something primal inside him. And unlike most fathers, Ray wasn't just going to grieve. He was going to dismantle the system that let this happen. Ray began with Karen's name. Karen Ellingsworth. A woman so bland on paper, she could have disappeared into a stack of grocery coupons. But Ray's gut told him she was rotten to the core. And when a man like Ray had a hunch, he followed it to the marrow. He requested court records. Old HOA filings. Police reports tied to the Whispering Pines community. One incident stood out immediately. Karen once called the cops on a Latino landscaper, claiming he was scoping homes. No charges were filed, but a formal HOA citation followed for unauthorized commercial presence. Then came more, a citation for a black couple's overly tinted windows. A fine against Daniels, the blind veteran, for public loitering while walking his service dog. Another against a Filipino nurse who parked her car the wrong way on her own curb. Ray's knuckles clenched as he read. This wasn't an overzealous neighbor. It was a pattern of targeted harassment under the HOA's fake rulebook. Daniels came to the house 2 days later, walking slower now, cane in one hand, the other nervously clutching his dog's harness. "You sure you want to go after them?" he asked, voice low. Ray leaned in. "They came after my son." "My son? What do you think?" Daniels exhaled. "Then you should see this." He handed Ray a manila envelope filled with printed emails, internal HOA communications that someone had anonymously slid under his door last year. In one, Karen referred to a new Middle Eastern family as possible squatter material. In another, she suggested installing cameras to keep an eye on those teens from the apartments. Daniels chuckled darkly. "They thought because I'm blind, I couldn't read Braille scans." Ray felt it then, not rage. Strategy. Next call was to his old friend Mia Tran, now lead investigative journalist for the local paper. Ray didn't waste time. "I've got emails, documents, 3 whistleblowers, and a board president who just shot a kid in the chest." Silence. "Then, I'll be there in an hour." Together, they crafted a timeline. Every biased citation. Every racial dog whistle. Every time the HOA overstepped legal bounds. The more they dug, the worse it got: forged meeting minutes, misused funds, violations of the Fair Housing Act. Mia found that Karen had been quietly sued twice before, once by a Hispanic single mother who'd moved out after relentless citations. Mia's article, published just 5 days after the shooting, hit the front page like a sledgehammer. The HOA that went too far: one boy's shooting unravels years of discrimination at Whispering Pines. Ray's phone rang off the hook. First came local activists. Then state representatives. Then something bigger. A week later, a sharply dressed man stepped into Ray's kitchen. He flashed his badge, FBI, Civil Rights Division. We've been watching the HOA sector for a while, the agent said. Yours just gave us the case we needed. The investigation moved fast. Civil rights violations. Illegal fines. False police reports. Racial targeting. Karen was subpoenaed. Her smug HOA board turned frantic. And then the community, once silent, rose up. Over 30 homeowners, from young couples to elderly veterans, signed on to a mass civil lawsuit against the HOA board. They wanted justice. Back pay for fines. Damages. Karen's immediate removal. Town halls were packed. News vans camped outside Whispering Pines. HOA tyrants became trending hashtags. Ray stood at the podium during one meeting, holding a picture of Eli in his youth baseball uniform. My son did nothing wrong, he said, voice firm. But even if he had, you don't get to shoot children for existing. Applause thundered across the room. For the first time in years, Karen looked scared. The queen of citations. The enforcer of beige tyranny. Now, reduced to a shaking defendant hiding behind her lawyer. But Ray? He wasn't done yet. Because revenge wasn't about rage. It was about reckoning. The courtroom was packed. Not just with spectators and press, but with tension so thick, it could have cracked the marble pillars. Outside, protesters held signs, "Justice for Malik, End HOA Abuse, She Shot a Child." While inside, Judge Hathaway's sharp gaze scanned the faces before her bench. Karen sat at the defense table, her blonde bob stiff, her hands folded tight in her lap like a scared child. Her attorney, Mr. Chambers, slick and smug, kept one hand on her shoulder, whispering prepped lines and reminders. Ray sat on the prosecution's side beside his son, Malik, who was dressed in a navy blue blazer to cover the scars, both physical and otherwise, that the whole room had gathered to dissect. The DA rose first. He outlined the facts: a blind veteran's sidewalk accident, a teenager who offered help, and a neighborhood woman who shot him in cold blood. He played the audio from the 911 call, Karen's voice frantic, filled with dramatics but missing one key element: any real threat. Then came the defense. "Ladies and gentlemen," Chambers said, pacing. "This isn't a case of malice. This is a case of fear." Ms. Cartwright was alone, vulnerable, and confronted with a situation that, given rising crime, felt threatening. She acted not out of hatred, but instinct. He turned to the jury. "And I ask you, what does a suspicious look mean when you're in danger? When adrenaline kicks in? Can we judge her panic in hindsight?" The undertone was obvious. Karen hadn't feared a boy. She'd feared a black boy. Gasps rippled through the gallery. Ray clenched his jaw. Daniel's fingers curled around Malik's hand. Then it was their turn. Malik was called to the stand. The courtroom stilled. "I was just helping the man cross," he said, voice quiet but unwavering. He dropped his cane and slipped. "I reached out. That's it. I didn't yell. I didn't threaten. I was wearing earbuds and a hoodie because it was cold." He paused. "Next thing I knew, I heard the shot. My chest exploded. I couldn't breathe." She didn't even say a word before pulling the trigger. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. Ray took the stand next. He spoke not as a father full of rage, but as a man begging a system to see his son as human. "I served in Iraq. I've carried the wounded. I've zipped up body bags. But nothing prepared me for watching my son go limp in my arms because someone looked at him and saw a monster. Not a helper. Not a kid. Not a boy with a 4.0 GPA who volunteers on weekends. Just a threat." He looked at the jury. One woman bit her lip. Another wiped her eye. And that woman, he pointed at Karen, who lives 3 houses from us, never once offered an apology. Not to Malik. Not to the vet. Not to anyone. Then came the clincher. The DA walked up with a USB and handed it to the clerk. "Let's play the footage." The gallery leaned in. The screen lit up. Security footage from a neighbor's Ring camera filled the courtroom, a wide sidewalk, an elderly veteran stumbling with his dog. A teenager, Malik, runs up, lowers his earbuds, offers his hand. Karen appears on screen from her porch, waving her arms. You can't hear her, but her posture is aggressive. Then she lifts her handbag. And fires. Malik drops. The veteran screams. Karen's face shows no fear. No shock. Just immediate justification. The room erupted. Karen's head dropped. Her lawyer slumped. The jury, stone-faced, saw what no spin could hide. 30 minutes later, the jury returned. On the charge of aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, we find the defendant guilty. Karen sobbed. Ray closed his eyes. Malik gripped his father's hand. Daniels hugged them both from behind. The judge continued. Furthermore, we find the actions of the HOA board to have contributed to a hostile, discriminatory environment. Their repeated inaction and bias reports, now part of the court record, have led to their immediate dissolution. The HOA shall pay damages, and the state will mandate bias and safety training for all regional HOAs, effective immediately. The courtroom erupted again, this time in cheers. Karen was led away in cuffs. Her HOA badge confiscated. The smug confidence erased. Outside, Ray and Malik stepped into the sunlight, reporters shouting, cameras flashing, but none of it mattered. Daniels stood beside them. The blind veteran, who'd refused to leave town until justice was done, raised his cane and said, "It's about damn time." Ray pulled his son into a hug, this time not in panic, but in relief. The battle had ended. But the movement? That was just beginning. The auditorium roared with applause, but to Malik, it was a slow, echoing wave, like the sea pulling back before a tide of change. He stood at the edge of the graduation stage, nerves buzzing beneath his neatly pressed navy blue suit. His left arm rested in a black sling, a quiet reminder of the chaos that brought him here. But his chin was high. He wasn't hiding anymore. As his name echoed across the speaker system, Malik Carter. The entire senior class stood up in a ripple of support, followed by parents, neighbors, even strangers. Some wore pins that read, "I stand with Malik." Others held small flags for Daniels, the blind veteran who now sat proudly beside Ray in the audience, his service dog at his feet. Ray stood, clapping with the intensity of a man who had carried too much rage and finally laid it down. His eyes locked with Malik's, and for a second, everything else faded. Malik crossed the stage slowly, each step a defiance, a victory. The principal handed him his diploma, but it was Daniels who approached next, placing something small and cool into Malik's palm. A silver pendant. Daniels' voice cracked slightly. For heroes who didn't wear uniforms, but showed up anyway. Malik clutched it tightly. He didn't need to speak. His walk back to his seat was a statement: they didn't break me. They exposed themselves. Outside, banners announced the formation of the new Brookline Civic Association, a diverse, democratically elected board. Gone were the days of hidden power grabs and secret fines. HOA Karen had not only lost in court, she'd lost her grip on the neighborhood. Ray turned to Daniels. "We didn't just win in court," he said. "We won our neighborhood back." A local reporter caught the quote and ran it as a headline. Later, in the final voiceover, the screen faded to black and the narration came in, calm but powerful. This wasn't about one bullet. It was about every family that's been targeted for looking different. Malik didn't run from hate, he stood up through it. And so did we. They tried to silence us with fear. But all they did was make us louder. If this story moved you, don't let it stop here. Stand up against injustice in your own community, because silence only empowers the bullies. Subscribe to the HOA Karen shorts for more real-life battles where ordinary people fight back against corruption, cruelty, and control. Collision, hit that like button if you believe in standing up for what's right. Speaking heads, share this video to let others know, the truth always finds its voice. Bellhop bell and turn on notifications, because the next story might just hit closer to home than you think.